Back again with another video. Anyways, I just finished the Percy Jackson series on Disney Plus, and well, I mean, I didn't just finish it. I finished it for a little bit now. I know it ended a few weeks ago, maybe even a few months ago, but I had some thoughts written down on it. I haven't gotten around to making a video on it, so I'm gonna do that now. This is gonna be a spoiler warning. I feel like it's been long enough that people who wanted to watch it already watched it, and people who didn't want to watch it and maybe were holding off on it won't care for spoilers. So I'm gonna talk about spoilers. But if you don't care and you read the books and you're not into watching it or you already watched it, please stick around and let me know what you think. All right, so we can start now. So let's begin. So I want to bring up my whole general idea about this show, which is that it's not bad, but personally, for me, it was still very disappointing. Not egregious in any sense, but just a lot of things that I did not agree with or things that just didn't make sense to me. That kind of brought it down. I want to mention from the outset that I did not want this show to be live action. I really wanted this show to be animated. And for the life of me, I don't understand why they didn't just go with animated, because these are for kids. And if the whole point is, to appeal to the audience of the readers and the fans who have been invested in watching this since they were children, then why stall any longer to put into live action after the movies came out? And obviously they didn't succeed. So I really think it would have just made a lot more sense, because if you do animated, then you could at least do one every year and you don't have to worry about the actors getting older. You could even, get through it a lot quicker. The action scenes can be a lot better. You could get to like the next series, which is the Heroes of Olympus, which is the one I really wanted to see live action. But again, I don't really understand why I didn't do it. I'm just a little ramble, I'm just rambling on, because right now it's the first season is the first book, and it's gonna be at least 5 seasons, so that's like at minimum 5 years. That's not, again, it's not considering if the actors don't age well or filming gets pushed back for whatever reason, and just the fact that no one can know physically what happens to people in 5 years. I mean, that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, 8 to 10 years, and again, I just think why wait any longer? But I just think it would have made more sense. But that's just me rambling. And let's get to the show. So what happened in the show? What's going on in it? Well, I want to start off with saying that I liked certain things about it, and I'll give credit where credit's due. Firstly, I like the effects of the show. I think the effects budget was obviously well funded, and if it wasn't, then they did a really good job with what they had. I cannot find anything to really complain about on that end. Another thing that I really liked is that they really built on the relationship between Sally and Percy, which is something I don't think the books don't do good enough. And again, I'm speaking as someone who read the books. I love the books as a kid. I read all the series. I still read any book that Rick Riordan puts out regarding that universe. I just try to stay up to date with everything. And I'm a huge fan of the books. As a kid, that was Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thing was literally the first book that got me into reading. Anyway, the whole point was I really like this book. I'm very passionate about this series and this universe and these characters. So I think that the show did a really good job building into Sally and Percy's relationship, something I don't think the books do really good enough. And I think the use of flashbacks in the show helped develop Percy's character and how much his mother means to him, and also developing Sally as a character. Even though she's a side character for most of the franchise and with her story, but how she dealt with Percy's foreboding future when he was young, considering she had no support, just goes to show what a really good mother she is. And I think the actress who portrayed Sally did a really good job. I specifically really like the scene between Poseidon and Sally. I think it's one of the final episodes where they're talking at a bar and they're just talking about Percy and his future. And she's obviously aware of that Percy eventually has to leave her and I guess go to camp. And she can't expect any support from Poseidon on that end. And she's aware of all these things, and she just wants to make sure she can ensure the best future for her own son. Just the whole Sally Jackson part of the show, I think was really well done, and I really appreciated it, because I don't think the books really go that, they don't really explain the strength of Bond, or they don't delve into it, I should say, as much as the show did in this first season and the first book did, at least. Because Sally's relationship to Percy, it's really, and at this point, it's the only person that matters to him. So building on that concept and having also recognize that relationship between mortals, like mortal parents and their demigod children, it's just really interesting, and I really liked it. But an issue with shows like this that are based on books is how much are you going to follow the original story. And people have different opinions on this, whether or not that it should be a little bit more leeway for live action productions to explore different avenues, in the story, to have your own little twists on things so that they don't specifically follow what goes on in the book, because oftentimes, that doesn't really translate well. And that makes sense, but I think this show did a really good job sticking faithful to the source material, at least compared to the films, which obviously were not that great. They were fun, they're fun and dumb, but they weren't great. I don't think that the films did a good job presenting Ares and building that relationship between the mother and the son. That's between Percy and Sally. So I think those are my 2 cents on the positives here of this show, and I want to give credit to obviously where it's due. I don't want to be a negative Nelly. That being said, there was a lot I did not like about this show, and it's not anyone's fault. It's my own personal opinion and beliefs, and if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. I'm just gonna voice out what grinded my gears in this show, I can say, and there was some things that really prevented me from enjoying the show fully. And this is probably gonna be the long part. So I think this show was not bad, but I do think it left me very disappointed. And there were some aspects of the show that I just could not let it go. And again, I'm someone who's very passionate about the books, and I don't fault this show if it wanted to change some things or give its own little twist on other stuff regarding the books and the lore. That's fine. I understand what that is. When it's in show business and TV business, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is that they changed Annabeth's race. For me, I will say for me personally, I didn't love it, but I also didn't mind it, because I didn't love it because I did grow up with this idea of Annabeth. And I mean, I know Rick's all about giving diversity and being inclusive and stuff like that, which he does in his later books, and I'm cool with that. But I just bro, you made her white. I would have been okay if she stayed white, preferably for me, just because I grew up on them, and I just always pictured Annabeth white. I've seen the fan art. I don't know who. There's someone that does a really good fan art, way better than what the books do. But that fan art of Annabeth, the most famous one from all the heroes, that's how I picture her. So obviously she wasn't that, and I was fine with it. And people say that's pandering. There's a whole thing about Disney, making characters different races, this and that, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I didn't love the idea, but I was also not against watching the show just simply because they did that. Because I was like, what, maybe the actors are gonna do a really good job. Maybe they are really faithful to Annabeth's character, so I'm not gonna mind it. And I can say after watching the show, because I thought I want to watch the show, make my own opinion on it, because I don't want to be prejudiced. I don't want to have any misconceptions about the show without watching it. So I watched it, and my opinion on this Annabeth thing was I really didn't like Annabeth, regardless of her race. Okay, make her black, that's fine, but I really do not understand why they didn't make her blonde. It really pissed me off. I'm not gonna lie, it really pissed me off. Because this is something that the movies got wrong. And everyone complained about it, which is why they changed it in the second movie. Because everyone acknowledges that no matter what you do with Annabeth, her main story arc, her main character journey revolves around her being blonde. And right now, maybe you could say that's an outdated concept because of, the modern day, that whole dumb blonde stereotype might not be as powerful or as well known these days. But regardless if they didn't want to go that route with her story arc, I still think that she should have had blonde hair. I would have just much rather preferred her to have blonde hair, because that's who she is, and that's really a big part of her story. And I'm really disappointed with how the show turned out with that, because there's other stuff about Annabeth that I didn't love. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents on it. Again, I didn't like Annabeth, but I'm explaining why I didn't like Annabeth. I don't want to just say that I hated Annabeth because they didn't change her hair. No, that's not the only reason. My main thing I was very annoyed about this, is that the source material is very clear that Annabeth's whole story, at least with the first few books, is that she is trying really hard to go past and disrupt this notion of this idea that blondes are dumb, and she feels about this very strongly. Not only because not just because she's blonde, that's not enough, but she's also the daughter of the goddess of wisdom, Athena. So her whole story arc, when the stories initially begin, is that she's doing anything to beat this trope that blondes are dumb, especially because she's not only the daughter of the wisdom goddess, so she tries so hard to beat all these stereotypes, to go against the norm that is associated with demigods, that they have ADHD and that they can't function well in school. Annabeth is all about beating those. She's about beating the allegations. She's one of the only demigods, or maybe the only one, that actually gets good good grades in school. So she fights against her own, I don't want to say disabilities, but her own issues regarding focus, because she has ADHD. I think she might have dyslexia. I'm not sure about that one. But and also the fact that she is one of the youngest campers, or I guess technically one of the oldest campers in the story. Her whole arc is that she's doing her best, studying her hardest, and just being so passionate about beating all these expectations that are placed on her, because she wants to live up to being a leader, a leader. And I didn't like that the show didn't make her blonde and didn't touch on that at all in this book and this season. And I haven't read the first book in a long time, so maybe this isn't even brought up during the first book. But I think they should have at least kept her hair and built on that in the next season, because I don't really know where we go on from here for Annabeth, at least, because there's so much growth she experiences throughout the books and the series. And eventually, she gets to a point where she acknowledges that, she is a leader, that she is not what people expect her to be. So I didn't like that they did that. Percy also didn't have black hair, which also kind of annoyed me, because it's like, bro, what is with this show and not getting the hair right? I'm pretty sure he had brown hair or like kind of blondish hair. I didn't like that either, because again, he's supposed to have black hair with green eyes. It's the most basic stuff. I can't understand why. I can't fathom why they didn't keep it like that. So yeah, I didn't like that about Annabeth. Another thing I didn't like about Annabeth, and again, I really think the Annabeth so terrible, is that Annabeth's not really smart in this show. She's not represented very accurately. Because the whole thing about Annabeth, at least in the first few books, is that Percy's supposed to be the fighter. He's supposed to be the dumb knucklehead who's always instigating, causing problems, but he's a good person in his heart. But he's supposed to be a fighter. And Annabeth is supposed to be the book smart one. But she's also a fighter. She can hold her own. But Percy's more powerful when it comes to fighting. But Annabeth is supposed to be a sort of a tactician. She's supposed to be the one to tell Percy and her allies what foe they're facing, what monster they have to defeat, and how to defeat them. What's the story associated with this monster? Who defeated this monster? What's the best way to defeat this monster? Etc. Etc. But she was not smart in this show. That's for sure. That is for sure. There were times where I think Grover, even Percy himself, were talking about, oh, this is this so and so monster, and this is how we beat her. It just pissed me off that it wasn't Annabeth saying that, because at the end of the day, I'm like, Annabeth, what's your point of being in this quest then? Because that made sense in the original book, because okay, Percy picks Annabeth because recent, I guess, kind of an ally / friend, but Annabeth had her, she was useful in the story. But in this story, I can't remember a point where I thought, yeah, only Annabeth could be this third quester, this third person on this quest. Because whenever, the whole point of Annabeth is that when the squad gets in trouble or encounters an animal or a magical creature they don't really understand the danger they're facing, Annabeth is the one that knows what to do, right? She's the tactician that can strategize the best way to defeat that monster. And that's what she brings to the table. Especially because, she's also the goddess of, she's the daughter of the goddess of wisdom. So she's supposed to be the smartest, the tactician, the strategist. And there's so many times where Percy was the one explaining some Greek stories to the daughter of wisdom. And I was like, no. I was like, no, not with me. No, I couldn't accept that. I refused it. Yeah, I was like, this show is testing me. This show is really testing me. But I thought that was really bad. So again, I think they did Annabeth so poorly. It was just disrespectful to the character. I think the book oftentimes makes it seem like Percy's clueless when it comes to these things. And I think the show kind of implied that Sally, Percy's mom, was telling him some of these myths and these stories. And also maybe Chiron when he was sort of looking after Percy in school. So I think this was the show's way of trying to make Percy seem not so intelligent, which I respect. You can do that. But you're also taking away a vital element of importance for another character, which is Annabeth. And unless you give her her own scenes or her own moments to really display her value that she brings to the table, then it just calls into question her whole purpose for being there. I do remember an example. I'll give a few examples because I don't want people to think I'm hating for no reason. When they're on the love ride, the boat thing, in the following scene, they get to the chair, right? That's a trap. And again, Percy's explaining the chair. And look, I'm also someone who's really into Greek mythology, and I've go out of my way to read any books I find on them. And when Percy's explaining this chair, like the golden chair that was at the end of the ride when they're on the boat, he's explaining that story to Annabeth. Now, again, as someone who's really into Greek mythology, even I didn't know that story. And, I buy that Percy has some knowledge about some Greek mythology, but I think more general stuff like Medusa, because, that's a popular story and stuff like that. Or, Hephaestus and Aphrodite. But still, I just really didn't understand what's. I just didn't get it. And another thing that pissed me off, I can't let go around of it. Another thing that pissed me off is that even in the 7th episode, where Percy says we're not in Kansas anymore, Annabeth says, "What is that?" It's made to seem like she didn't understand the joke, and I'm like, "You're Annabeth. You're telling me out of all the people here, you're not gonna understand that joke about this famous movie from a book or whatever? How are you not gonna understand that reference, Annabeth? Out of everyone here, you should be the only one that understood that." But okay. Whatever. Disrespect Annabeth. I'm gonna stop ragging on Annabeth because I don't want people. I don't hate the actress. Okay, again, this was nothing. She didn't do anything wrong. Her acting was fine. It's not on her. It's the writers. Because I'm mad at the writers because this is just stupid. The acting, for the most part, was fine. I didn't love Percy's acting. I don't think he did a bad job. I know that kid was in that Ryan Reynolds movie. And I think in that movie, he does a really good job playing a mini Ryan Reynolds. When I expect Percy Jackson, I expect the sort of sarcasm, like a subtle bravery in the acting and when he's encountering scary moments. But especially, I want him to have that sarcasm. He's, because Percy's kind of like Spider-Man, where he just jokes in serious situations most of the time. He uses humor as a defense mechanism, or he's just really sarcastic and snippy. But I didn't really see that from this. Maybe they'll fix it in future seasons where he'll be more like the person from the book, because I think you don't really want to stray away from that, because that's his character is the most vital part of this lore in this universe. So you might want to change other characters' personalities and the characters, but his, I think, really has to be very faithful to what the original character is. And I'm not mad at the actor, the boy, because they're just kids, and I think they're really doing a good job. Obviously, way better actors than I could ever be, but who's directing, who's approving these scenes? For example, the very first fight with Mrs. Dobbs, the fact that for the kid, his whole ass teacher turned into a monster, jumps you and you stab her, and she just dissipates into dust, and your reaction's like, did nobody see that? It's like, no, bro, no. That maybe that's a studio thing or something, but I was like, that's your acting in that moment? Like, you should be freaking out. You should be scared, but you're just like, dang, y'all see that? I just killed my teacher. Like, what? No, man, no. There were things I hated, story choices where they deviated from the source material. Overall, again, I don't want to make it seem like I dislike the show. I did. Generally, I like the show. There were some things that made me stop me from fully enjoying it. But overall, I think the show was okay. 3 big things were Annabeth, Percy, and Gabe. So for Gabe, the one that really pissed me off about Gabe is that, again, I didn't understand what his whole point was. He's really a wuss in this show, and I don't know why they went that route with Percy's stepdad, because it didn't make sense to me. And this was something that I think that they really should have just stuck to the book, because it made a lot more sense, and it gave you a better understanding of the lengths that Sally was willing to go to protect her son from being hunted down by monsters. And it made you just see her in a whole new light, respect her more, which isn't to say that the show made you lose any respect for her, but it just puts her in a more powerful light, that this mom went through this. And why am I saying that? Because in the book, the whole point about Gabe, that dickhead, is that Sally was with Gabe because he was such a heavy smoker. He was an asshole, but he was also a very heavy smoker. He invited his friends for poker night or whatever. But the point of that was that because of how much he smoked, he just smelled awful. And the stench was enough to sort of deter and hide Percy's own scent to monsters. Him being the son of the big 3, his stench goes beyond other demigods. He's, for lack of a better term, he smells worse, or I guess more powerful than other demigods. So that was the whole point of his purpose in the books. And obviously in the books, he also turns out to be sort of an abusive dickhead. Like, he potentially, physically abused Sally. We don't know how much it is or how long it was going on for, but it did happen at one point. So, it stands to reason it happened before, and Sally just never did anything. Sally just didn't love him, didn't care about him. She was just with him just for the sake of her son. But this show, they make Gabe a wuss. It's clear in the book he's an abusive dickhead, but he there's a reason he's there. And I don't understand for the life of me why sweet Sally Jackson would be with Gabe in the show. Because he's just there. And again, I was like, why are you with him? What's the point of him being here? Gabe in the books, his smell wards off monsters because he just smells disgusting. But here in the show, I just don't understand why they have Sally with Gabe at all. I feel like they could have just omitted him because he really doesn't. Again, he doesn't offer anything. He doesn't do anything. He's just a wuss. He doesn't even seem like an abusive dickhead. It just seems like he's just a wuss. Like he tries to act like a man, but Sally shuts him down real quick. You know. But I'm like, why are you with him? It doesn't make sense for you to be with him then, because he's not really doing anything. He doesn't serve any purpose here. So why would you put yourself through this? I didn't understand that. One positive thing that's also like, yeah, I guess it's also kind of negative, was the action. I think that again, the character designs and the CGI, all of that was great. I think that was perfect. It was just what I wanted. I have no qualms about that. Nothing to complain about. Mrs. Dobbs, the Chimera, it was all great. The scenes, the settings, everything looked really good. The fights were a little bit underwhelming. That's not a huge gripe I have with the show, but I think this is one of those cases where the show stuck very close to the source material, and I expected the fights to be a little bit better. I wanted more choreography. I'm not hating too much on it because I know, for one, these demigods are really young, so it's not like they have a lot of skills in their belt to pull from. And for another, I imagine as the seasons go on, the fighting will improve. Not too angry about that. Again, it depends, I guess, for some people. For me, it was underwhelming, the fights, but I didn't hate them by any means. But the effects really just, I think, carried for me a lot of the joy I had from watching the show. Because, again, the effects were just really well done, and I really agree with that. And again, I don't want to say everything was bad because, I want to add some positives again. I want to keep this balanced. I know I rambled on for a long time about the bad things, and I feel bad about that because I don't want to hate on this show, even though I really already am. I like the intro, at the very very beginning, the introduction of Percy with the voiceover and the clips of him seeing all these creatures following him. I really like that because it kind of better prepares Percy's transition into this world of monsters and demigods and gods better than the books did. Because, if you're a reader and you read Percy's like, yeah, you're a demigod and the gods exist and blah, 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 blah. And he's just like, oh, yeah, I guess, yeah, I believe it. It's like, do you really? You're just going to believe like that, bro? Are you stupid? But I like that this show, it shows Percy, like, from his youth, experiencing certain things that he couldn't explain. And nothing too crazy. Obviously nothing ever that was too crazy. But I like that this show was, like, preparing Percy for that eventual point where he has to go to Camp Hamflood and experience this quest and these journeys. When the real feeling comes. So I really like that because I think the show, the books don't do a good job transitioning Percy's character and from accepting the fact that he's in this new world. Another thing that I really thought was really well done is episode 4 with the train scene. I think that whole train scene with the monster, the mother of monsters, the chimera in the bag, I think that was probably my favorite scene, or one of my favorite scenes in the show, because that one felt so good. There was tension. It was clear that the kids were afraid. I was afraid for them. I was like, damn, what's in that? I was like, I don't even remember what's in that bag. Hey, y'all better run, man. Like, I don't know what's going on. But I really like that scene. I think that scene was really well done. The tension, the kids running away, all that whole, it almost felt like someone else was in charge of that scene. So whoever did that, more scenes like that are amazing. I definitely would like to see more of that. I also like the scene where Percy and Grover are in the underworld and the shoes kick in and they're gonna drag Percy into Tartarus, and that, which is represented as a huge hole in the ground. And I love that scene. I love how scary it seemed being in that situation. I like the show's representation of Hades, which is more something I liked from Riordan and his writing, but I don't like when media portrays Hades as a villain or the bad guy. I prefer to think of him as a responsible dickhead. Like, he's not a nice guy, but he does his job, and he's vindictive, obviously, but he doesn't go out of his way to mess with people. He's just like, I'm here, I'm doing my job, don't mess with me, let me do my job. If you mess with me, obviously I'm gonna do something to you. But I like how the book and the show represent Hades. I like the setting of the underworld, the effects. I like the bolts. I think all the gods were fine in general. Their actors were cool. I think Chiron was probably underutilized. There wasn't much mentorship going on in the book, but I think that's something they can build on in later seasons. So overall, again, the show was fine. I think the show was good. I liked a lot of it, even though it seems like I did it. I did like watching the show. I wouldn't rewatch it though, because I didn't love it either. I think it was fine. It was good. Like I wouldn't say it's bad. It's not a bad show. It's a good show, but for as someone who's a fan of the source material and the original and the universe and the lore, my expectations were higher. And this is something that I've always had an issue with Rick Riordan, because man, I'm just like, I this well, before I get into that, those are my 2 cents on the show. This last part is just gonna be me ranting on Riordan, because I love that guy, man. But yeah, overall the show was fine. I will watch the second season. I don't think the show was bad by any means. I just think my expectations for the show were higher and they didn't live up to those expectations. Whether or not that's fair, I guess that depends on your perspective. For me, I felt like, considering, and I assume, if I'm not mistaken, Ryden was involved with this, so I don't know if he had some influence in these choices. But if he did, I don't agree with the choices that he made, even though it's his book. Like, but yeah, I would watch the second season. I think it was good. Probably rate it, a 6 or 7, because it wasn't it wasn't amazing by any means, but it was fine. It was definitely a lot better than a lot of the series that Disney puts out. So there's potential there, I think. But okay, my last part of this long video is my rant on Rick Riordan. Me and Rick, we have an interesting relationship. On the one hand, I have to thank him for getting me so involved and for having a huge love for books and for giving me one of the best, not the best series I've ever read. I have to thank him for that. I have yet to find another series that engrosses me as much as the Percy Jackson and the Heroes of Olympus stories did. The characters, the ideas, there's so much good stuff in there, and it's beautiful and it's amazing and I love it. But I do have some issues with Rick, and they're not unfair issues. They're not things I hate about him, and I would never stop reading his stuff. I'm always gonna support all the stuff he puts out because he puts out really good things. I don't think he's put out something great in a while. Nothing bad, but I don't think he's put out something great in a while. I think the Apollo series kind of comes close, but the last really, really good book he put out was House of Hades, in my opinion. But here are my things about Rick. I'm disappointed in Rick because I think, again, this is my opinion. It's his story, it's his universe, it's his decisions. It was his creative mind that came up with all this stuff. But I still am disappointed with him. Much like how people are disappointed in J.K. Rowling. I've never read Harry Potter, but I always thought that this series had the potential to rival Harry Potter. I thought it was that good. And I think the one thing that held this series back from being one of the greatest, a book and series that everybody loves, is that the writing, I guess, never matures with the readers. And again, this is something Rick's talked about. I know that he said that his books are specifically for middle schoolers, and I respect that, and I appreciate that, but I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it because I think, as coming from a fan, when Rick's books came out, they were perfect for the middle schoolers of that time, but those people have grown up, like me, and now anything new he puts out is something that's new. But his most loyal fans, and I think most of the people who still read his stuff, are still older people. Like, I could be wrong, but I know a lot of people who are my age or older who read his books when they were little, when they first came out when they were little, and they're still reading his stuff. And I think that he has so much potential to make a great, fantastic series if he had just matured the writing and made it less kiddish and put more stakes in it, put more tension in it, more suffering in it. I mean, I'm not a masochist, but it's like, I always felt that Percy Jackson was being held back from being in the ranks of the greatest fantasy stories ever told. I really thought so, because there's just so much good stuff that Rick comes up with, like this idea of demigods still existing, different abilities, the gods, the whole prophecy stuff. Like, it was just so good, so good. And then I think his most mature book would probably be, honestly think his best book he's ever written was the man, what's it called? I can't believe I'm forgetting the the last Olympian. That's the his final book of the original series. I think that's his best book he's ever written. I don't think anyone can dispute that. He's written other great books. I think House of Hades, Mark of Athena. I really like Son of Neptune because my boy's back. But there's just that book was so well done because it built up. There was stakes being built up throughout the years. Sacrifices were made, consequences were suffered. There's like this it culminates in this final battle with the bad guy, and the prophecy comes fulfilled, but it's not in the way you expect it, and people died, and it was just such a good story, and it was just such a good book, and he never got back there. And something I don't like about Rick's writing sometimes is that it just seems really repetitive. Like these kids they're supposed to sound different, but sometimes they talk in the same way, they make the same types of jokes, they act the same, they say the same things, and it's disappointing. It's disappointing because as a fan, I want Rick to write something more serious, more for like older fans. Because think about it, these are kids fighting monsters. How is it possible that this could be anything but a horror show? These are kids experiencing trauma, monsters fighting, and obviously these monsters, they go into dust, so there's not a lot of blood, but a lot of these kids are still experiencing war. Their allies are still fighting, their allies are being killed by monsters, and it's just like, hey man, like this can't be there's a point where you recognize that the material here is really not meant for kids. Like this is meant for these things that are really going on. This trauma and stress of all the journeys and the quests they've had to make, the sacrifices people have had to suffer. It just makes you think like this can't just keep being written for middle schoolers, for that age group, because this isn't, the original people, your original fans who for your ride or dies, they're grown up, and I think they deserve something a little bit more serious. And it's always disappointing me because the standard of quality that Percy Jackson series deserves, I think has diminished a little, and it makes me sad because I read these books, like the new books he comes out with, and they're all like, again, these characters just all sound the same. They really all sound the same. It's a very safe way of speaking. I just think there was so much there, and I expect better in the future from the show. And for Rick Riordan, again, it's his story. At the end of the day, it's his story, and I'll forever be grateful for it, and I'll still watch and read anything he puts out, just because I'm a fanboy. I really am, and I like what he puts out. I really think that had he made his stories more serious, with room for a more mature audience, I think it would have been the best thing, because middle schoolers could have started off with this series, with the Percy Jackson series. High schoolers could have read his Heroes of Olympus series, and anything new that he puts out could be like in the eyes of the original audience, who went right now would be like maybe in their 20s, 30s, because it's hard to read the books that he puts out and still think like, oh my god, Percy's not even in college yet. Like, what the hell, boy? All this time? It's hard, it's hard to visualize that, because it just messes with the time and everything. But I hope one day he puts out a book where the demigods are like really old, not really old, but 30s or something like that. When they're older and they have to like go on this quest, and it's more serious, it's a more serious take, more serious writing, more bloody, more crazy, more wild, more dramatic. That'd be great. I would, man, he'd be the GOAT if he did that. But it's up to him. But yeah, anyways, this video is really long, so I apologize for that. That's my take on this show. I think it was a good show. If you like Percy Jackson, I would say watch it, because what I didn't like for me might not be the same for you. If you like fantasy shows in general, I think it's okay. It's an okay watch. I wouldn't go out of my way to say you gotta watch this show, but I would say like if you end up watching it, I don't think you'll hate it. If you had to choose between this and the One Piece show, and I've never watched One Piece, I've never read One Piece, but the One Piece show was more fun. I would say it was more fun. This show isn't very fun, but it's not bad. It's really made for kids, man. And I'm not a kid anymore, so I can't say that it does a great job at that, because I'm not a kid. But I think overall it was not a bad show. And if you end up watching it, I think it'll be fine. I don't think you'll love it. I don't think you'll hate it. You'll just be like, oh, it's something to pass the time. Hopefully they build on the second season. Hopefully the actors building on what they're doing, the writing. I really hope it improves. Hope the findings are better. Hope the effects stay the same. I have nothing to complain about there. But yeah, that's my take on this show. I'm smiling because we're done, even though I've been talking for